Hello and welcome back to Pentor Cars, Cornish car collectors. Now up until now here on the channel we've only really featured cars that are either new additions to the collection, cars that we've bought in sort of the past 12 months, such as my Ford Focus RS Mark 1 and my MG ZR and ZS. We've also featured some cars which are kind of passing through the collection, I suppose, such as the BMW E36 M3, our Renault Sport Clio 172, our Peugeot 206 GTI 180 to name but a few, and our Ford Sierra GL. Yep, that's right, I've got a bit of an update on that one which I'll share in the next video. As for cars that have kind of been in the collection a bit longer, well, you have seen them. We featured them briefly in our car show video, and I drove the XR 4x4 up to Ford Nationals back in July, and more recently I took the Rover 800 Vitesse up to work. But for today, it's time to go right back to the beginning where it all started. The car that currently holds the title for car owned the longest in the Pentor Cars collection. Yep, we've owned this one nearly 13 years, and today we're going to have a look at our beautiful 1990 Ford Escort XR3i Cabriolet. Do you know that around 1 million Ford Escorts were produced, making it one of the world's best-selling cars? But the true headline behind that impressive number is that the Escort actually achieved that sales figure faster than any of its rivals. The Escort began as a small, rear-wheel drive, 3-box saloon car in 1967, but it was the all-new front-wheel drive hatchback layout of the 1980s that resulted in the Escort taking over the world, dominating markets in most European countries, America and South America. You could buy an Escort as a hatchback, as an estate. There was even an Escort saloon called the Orion and an Escort van. And of course, the sporty specials such as the XR3, the RS Turbo, the Cosworth, or the Cabriolet. The likelihood is if you were born before the year 2000, then you definitely have a story about a Ford Escort. Whether it was your trusted family transport, or your first car, or the hot hatch that you were so proud of and so fondly remember. Maybe you remember a trip with a friend or a family member in their Escort, or you just loved watching them in motorsport outperform rival manufacturers, and it was just the car you always wanted. People remember Ford Escorts with great affection. I've been using this car quite regularly this year, and it always surprises me how many waves I get and how many conversations just spontaneously start up with passers-by when I'm in petrol stations or in car parks, or mainly when I'm crossing the short ferry link between Cornwall and Devon. People come over wearing big smiles, looking at the car, they're not looking at me, and they say, "I remember those," and it's like they've seen an old friend. I absolutely love it, and I'm sure many of you will know what I'm talking about. Those of you that have got classic cars or cars of interest, you've always got to plan a few extra minutes when making a journey in your car. So today I'm going to share with you the story of the Escort Cabriolet, or the Escort Cabby. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about my 12-year ownership experience of this car. So please do stay tuned. And also, don't forget to hit like, it really helps to promote the video. Do subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment. Love to know what you think about the Escort or about the videos here on the channel. So thanks so much for joining, and let's get on with it. The Ford Escort XR3i Cabriolet. The Erica project commenced in 1976 with the intention to deliver a world car built and sold internationally, and Ford swapped the drive of the Escort from the rear to the front, bringing what would become the Mark III Escort bang up to date. Albeit many rally and racing enthusiasts consider the Mark III to be the first of the wrong-wheel drive Escorts. But in truth, the vast majority of Escorts were bought by people looking for small, economical transport, not tail-sliding rally machines. The Mark III Escort was launched on the 3rd of September 1980 to real praise and positive sales performance. But what about the Escort Cabriolet? Well, despite being signed off in 1978, the drop top was not amongst the launch range of the all-new Ford Escort Mark III. Developed in conjunction with car manufacturer Karmann, who are based in Germany and became known for their work on convertibles, coupes and other niche models. But the Escort Cabriolet concept was not ready until 1981. The car was shown for the first time at the Earl's Court Motor Show of the same year as the Escort convertible, but by the time of launch, this would change to the more romantic French word, cabriolet. Putting the car into production was agreed on the 12th of October 1981, and it took just 2 years before the car would go on sale in late 1983, initially with a 1.3 litre or a 1.6 litre engine. Now, I'm sure, like many of you, I've spent years telling people that the Escort Cabriolet is an Escort estate with the roof cut off and a bit of strengthening. Well, if like me that's been your bit of trivia that you share every time you see one, you probably need to stop. You see, it's a common misconception that the Escort Cabriolet was based on an estate shell. That's not actually the case. Sure, a few estate cars were sacrificed as drop-top prototypes, and once in production, the estate floor pan was used due to its length and the rear suspension setup, which saved engineering costs during development. But in truth, around 80% of the Escort Cabriolet is either unique or modified from the standard car. The Cabriolet has reinforced and strengthened sills and windscreen pillars, and extra bracing on the pedal brackets and the steering column. Other unique features about the Escort Cabriolet Mark III is a body-coloured engine bay, a full-size spare wheel, and the electric aerial was moved from the front wing to the rear wing. At launch, the 1.6 litre Mark III Escort Cabriolet was branded 1.6i as opposed to XR3i. This was a conscious decision by Ford's marketing team for insurance reasons. Ultimately, the Mark III Ford Escort 1.6i Cabriolet is essentially an XR3i. It won't surprise any of us that the Escort Cabriolet sold really well from the off. I mean, who wouldn't fall in love with this design and the freedom felt only with open-air motoring? The all-new Escort Cabriolet also caught the attention of Princess Diana, who was supplied one by Ford in Regency Red Metallic, which was not a standard UK colour, with the exception of the bespoke colour and some communication devices fitted for security reasons. The Princess of Wales's Escort Cabriolet was standard, and she drove this car until her black Escort RS Turbo arrived. To mark the end of Escort Mark III production, Ford's Special Vehicle Engineering Department's Cabriolet Swan Song was the all-white special edition produced for 1985. The car was finished entirely in diamond white, complete with the RS body kit and Orion type grille. It even had white wheel trims. It was a real success with around 700 produced and sold, and it achieved celebrity status in the British television crime drama Dempsey and Makepeace as their second Escort Cabriolet. Escort 86, or Erica 86 as it was codenamed within Ford, was intended to be a refresh of the very successful Mark III Escort. However, Ford went one step further, revising pretty much every element of the comfort and aerodynamics of the car, and so the Escort Mark IV was born. The most noticeable difference was the new model's styling, although the Mark III shape was clear beneath the new car's smoother lines and curves. The Mark IV looked far more fresh, youthful, and in keeping with the aerodynamic age of the mid-80s and early 90s. Ford said the new shape achieved better fuel economy and a reduction in wind noise, claiming an 8% efficiency improvement and greater stability at higher speeds. Launched in 1986, the Ford Escort range carried over from the Mark III into the Mark IV, and you could buy an Escort as a hatchback, an estate, and a bit later an Escort Combi, a saloon, and this is where the much coveted Orion 1600 injection gear came in, an Escort van, and the Mark IV Escort Cabriolet, albeit this time Ford's marketing team had finally decided to give it that all-important XR badge. At launch, the Mark IV Escort Cabriolet was available in 2 trim levels, this, the mighty and desirable XR3i, and the more elegant and refined Ford Escort Cabriolet Gear. Albeit in July 1987, the gear trim level was dropped, leaving only the XR3i, which was the only version of the Cabriolet that could be bought between then and right up until October 1990, when production of the Mark IV ceased. Now, from launch, the XR3i Cabriolet was exactly the same in trim as the tin-top XR3i, albeit I think with the exception of tinted glass. Other options available were central locking, but only on the doors, not on the boot. ABS was also available and a trip computer. Electric windows, heated front windscreen, and for the first time, the option of a power roof. This was a class first. No other manufacturer was fitting power hoods to their convertibles at this time. It proved so popular that eventually Ford would make it a standard feature. As you can see, ours is a little tired, but it works well. As for colours for the XR3i, well, you could buy it in Rosso Red initially, but that eventually became Radiant Red. You could also get it in Diamond White, Nimbus Grey, changing to Mercury Grey, Black, and, bespoke to the Cabriolet, Azure Blue, which would be replaced by Amalfi Blue in time. Ford's special edition cars had sold really well in the UK and across Europe, so to mark 50,000 Escort Cabriolets, in 1987 the first of the Mark IV special edition Cabriolets was released, with two two-tone exterior paint options, Strato Silver over Mercury Grey and Crystal Blue over Strato Silver. These cars were fitted with the Rally Sport rear spoiler and blue-piped Daytona interior as opposed to the usual red. After this, the special editions just kept coming, with 5 more built in Mark IV Cabriolet form. The first was in 1988, 300 all-white Escort Cabriolets were built. Consistent with the Mark III special edition, these cars were finished in diamond white with white leather interior, white 15-inch RS turbo alloy wheels and RS body kit, but no bonnet vents. Marketed at the new money yuppie types, the car was £14,500, so considerably more than your £11,300 for the standard XR3i Cabriolet of the time. Then, built in recognition of Boris Becker's success, next came the Escort Tennis Edition. Just over 1,500 were made and came again in diamond white with white electric hood, 14-inch lattice alloy wheels and half shadow leather and Zolder cloth Recaro front seats. In 1988 came the Moonstone special editions, again with the half shadow leather and Zolder cloth Recaro seats and a number of options as standard. The unique special edition feature of these cars was their paint and contrasting hood colours, Aquafoam metallic with grey hood, Aquarius with blue hood and Amethyst with grey hood. Ford produced around 1,200 monotone specials. Then, to mark the launch of the EFI engine, another special edition was launched with another round of two-tone cars, this time Flambeau Red over Moonstone, Bahama Blue over Moonstone and Inca Gold over Flint Grey. All had power hoods, colour-coded to the body and were fitted with the Orion 1600E multi-spoke alloy wheels and half Raven leather, half Zolder cloth seats, albeit not Recaros this time. Finally, to mark the 100,000 Cabriolets built, a Pacifica Blue Cabriolet was produced with RS Turbo alloy wheels and body kit and leather interior, often referred to as the All Blue or SE500, which is strange because 600 were actually made for the UK market and many more across Europe. And the All Blue is probably the most desirable of all of the Mark IV Escort Cabriolets. Now, in addition to the decal change that happened on the car, the introduction of Zolder fabric and electric windows being fitted as standard in 1988, in 1989 the sporty Escorts had a bit of a facelift, with both the XR3i and the RS having new bumpers and the XR3i being fitted with 14-inch Cosworth style lattice alloy wheels. Inside the car the centre console was extended, and I believe that it was at this point that Ford started to fit the electric hood as standard to these cars. This would go on to be known as the Ford Escort XR3i 90 spec. Now, late in 1990, production of the Mark IV ceased as it made way for the Escort Mark V, and we're going to stop our story here and pick it up in a future video. You see, we actually own a really nice example of a Mark V Ford Escort XR3i Cabriolet. So watch out for a video at some point in the future where we'll continue the story of the Escort. Sat here inside the car, it really is like stepping back in time. People who are not familiar with the Mark III and the Mark IV Escort will often comment about how narrow the dashboard is. Because of course, there's no air conditioning or fancy electrical systems to accommodate. Plus the engine is where it should be, under the bonnet and not under your feet. Being a 90 spec car, ours has the electric windows, electric and heated mirrors, and heated front screen. This car actually still has all of its original glass etched with the registration. Also, being a later car, it has the Zolder cloth interior as opposed to the Daytona, otherwise known as Red Fleck. Another difference with this being a later car is that the fuel gauge is on the left and the temperature gauge on the right, whereas earlier in the production run of Mark IVs, they were actually the other way around. Now, I'm not quite sure why that is. Usually, manufacturers will put the fuel gauge on the side that corresponds with the side that you fill up your fuel, which is on the right on this car. Ford seemed to have done the opposite. They seem to have moved the fuel gauge from the right, which would have made sense and acted as a reminder for the driver to fuel up on the right, to move it to the left. I'm not quite sure why that happened. Maybe one of you knows, and if you do, please let me know in the comments below. But topless motoring in the 70s and early 80s really was a hobby exclusively enjoyed by owners of Triumph, MG and the like. But that all changed in 1979 when Volkswagen launched their Golf Cabriolet in Europe, with the Escort Cabriolet arriving just a few years later. All of a sudden, modern and trendy couples and families could really start enjoying drop-top motoring, and they really did, with hundreds of thousands of convertible cars being built across the manufacturers. In developing this car, Ford and Carman used a rollover bar at the B-pillars. Whilst the rollover bar does spoil the lines of the car a bit, it provides considerable structural rigidity and a place to locate the front seat belts. In the absence of C-pillars, rear seat belts are lap belts. The last thing to mention whilst we're inside the car is the stereo. Now, Ford fitted the model 2005 radio cassette in the Mark IV Escorts. I like to keep my cars standard, but because we use this car fairly regularly, I've actually swapped out the original stereo for this Sony multimedia unit. But don't panic, I do have the original stereo all wrapped up at home, and I will put it back in the car at some point in the future. So we're out for a drive in the XR3i, here on the lovely coast road at Whitsand Bay in Cornwall. And the first thing to say is I have had to put the roof up to cut out the wind noise so that you can hear me. It's made it a little bit dark here in the car too, so I hope that doesn't come through too much on camera, but we shall persevere. There's a couple things to say right at the off when driving this car, and it's important that I'm honest. Whilst I absolutely love driving it, it's great fun. It's a bit rattly, but it's great fun. Engine's nice and peppy, and you've got a little bit of performance there. It doesn't drive nearly as well as the Mark IV hardtop XR3i, and that's largely due to the additional rigidity afforded to the hardtop car with that fixed roof. But it does drive great, it's still good fun. The other thing to say about this car is that whilst, as I've said, the engine is peppy and revvy and still good fun, this is no longer a quick car. Age has not been kind to it, but also in comparison to anything really that is more modern, this is not quick anymore. The launch Mark IV XR3i Cabriolet had the Bosch K Jetronic mechanical fuel injection system and produced around 104 brake horsepower. But this car has the electronic fuel injection system, which is fitted from September 1989. The EFI gave an extra 3 brake horsepower and turned the horsepower up to 107 with a 0 to 60 time of 9.7 seconds. But having said this, and as I've already said, I think this old car would need a little bit longer to reach 60 these days. As I've already said on the video, this car comes out regularly during the summer and we use it quite a bit. And because of that, it does have a few age-related marks. This isn't a garage queen, and none of the Pentor cars are really. But this one is showing its age a little bit. It is still the original radiant red paint. It's not been resprayed, and it is still red. It's not pink, which is a good thing. But it does have some stone chips up the front and a few age-related marks. I suppose I could have the car resprayed, but if I did that, I think it would probably change the way that I use this car. You see, when I have cars painted, it does stress me out a little bit when you have to think carefully about where you park them, where you drive them, not driving too close to hedges. We're on this lovely cliff road now, and well, the brambles are creeping out into the road. If the car had been painted, would I be making this drive? I don't know. But for now, we're going to keep enjoying it as it is. At some point in the future, I'm sure we'll have to restore it, but for now, we'll just keep driving it. Outside of the paintwork though, I have had quite a bit of work done to the car over the years. I've had a new mohair roof fitted as the original vinyl was split and leaking, and because the car would put out a bit of blue smoke on startup and was feeling a little tired, a couple of years ago I had the engine removed and the cylinder head completely rebuilt, sorting the common valve stem oil seal issue, plus enabling a new clutch to be fitted, new timing belts, water pump, etc. And now it runs lovely. This old XR3i really is, though, very original, and it's been so well looked after by previous owners and by me over its 31 years. And I'm sure it's got lots of miles left in it yet. If you live in the UK, and if you're local to the southwest, then chances are you may have seen this car at some of the local car shows. I'm an active member of the XR Owners Club, and this car has been a regular on the club stand for the past 10 years. I've owned this car for a long time, and I've got absolutely no plans of selling it either now or in the future. My oldest son is 13, and both of my boys have grown up with this car. In fact, I think one of them has designs on driving this when he turns 17. Now, I might have agreed to that a few years ago when these cars were worth just a few £100s. But like all modern classic cars and classic cars, they just seem to have gone up and up in price. I'm going to have to rethink whether I let him drive this one. But to be honest, the value of this car is not what it's about. It's about owning it and enjoying it. And we've really enjoyed this car for what is nearly 13 years. And I'm sure we'll enjoy it for another 13 years to come and beyond. And I really hope that you've enjoyed taking a good look around my Mark IV XR3i Cabriolet and learning a little bit about the history. Don't forget that we've got a Mark V XR3i Cabriolet, so do stay tuned to the channel and we'll feature that one at some point in the future. Also, please hit like, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done already, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the car. Thank you again so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to show you this car. I do hope to see you again here at the channel, here at Pentor Cars, Cornish Car Collectors. But for now, it's bye for now. Bye-bye.